Hi guys, welcome back to Canary Cast. Good to see you back here. Whilst you're here, do us a favour, like the video, leave us a comment, subscribe as well, that'd be great. But as you can see, something a bit different this week. We're calling it a debrief because it will sort of be a season review. We will obviously cover that, and then in the second half, we're going to look forward to next season as well, because I think we can all get excited about that now. To help us do that, we've obviously got guests. You know who they are by now. You know both these faces. The Athletics' Michael Bailey. How are you, Michael?
Good afternoon.
Feeling smug after your prediction last time you were on here?
Hugely. Yeah.
Good man.
It was my sole reason for hoping they won the championship, I've got to be honest.
Hodgey's here too. Hodgey, how are you, my man? Brand new podcast as well.
Yeah, exciting times with that, but like I've said this in Michael's pod last night. Last night I had a headache. Today I'm just tired. So yeah. You're getting zombie Hodgey.
Like it, nice. Jacob, I think we're all a bit knackered after the season, aren't we, mate?
Yeah, I'm going to get the back track on and start trying to carry people because we'll get through this and then look forward to some new videos throughout the season. But yeah, just get this one out of the way. At least it's positive, you know. Well, what was it, 29 wins in the end? We've done well enough to go up and yeah. Happy to kind of talk about it, really, mate.
Yeah, it's just going to be a chilled out chat because we're at the end of the season and let's get it debriefed and move on. I think it's fair to say we were all fairly confident we were going to end up back in the Premier League this season. Michael, you called first place. We've obviously gone and done that. But what was the point of the season that you thought, yeah, okay, I've called this. We are going to win the league?
Yeah, it's almost easier to suggest the point when I was worried about it, I think, because I felt sort of in the Bournemouth time and Derby time that I was really worried that they had all these, really good quality players, and especially I'm thinking about being Todd and Emmy, and there was the danger of that unraveling because there was no point in keeping them if they weren't motivated to perform at their best level. So I genuinely felt like that was a really difficult period. I think once they then got going and Emmy would basically play pretty well against Rotherham, and you could already see then, he was sort of finding his feet and that he probably wouldn't be an issue. I think it took Todd a little bit longer to get up to speed more than anything, I think, in terms of fitness and sharpness. But as soon as they were there and playing, you looked at the degree they were controlling games, which was impressive, and you could see how they were evolving as things went on. And then you threw in, Mario Vrancic's free kick against Wickham and the comeback against Sheffield Wednesday. They're the two that stick in my mind. And I think I just never really contemplated that they wouldn't do it. I honestly just did not think there was the quality in the Championship for these teams to finish above them. That was the thing. I ran out of teams who were going to finish above them in the end, because you just see them and go, well, you're not good enough. And then that would be it. And by the time you ticked off 20 of them, you knew it wasn't going to really change. So I think it was all that really. And I suppose after the Swansea game, there was a little bit of which way is this going to go? Because it was either going to, Brentford and Swansea were really going to kick on, or Norwich were going to react in the manner that they did. And to be honest, they blew everyone away after that.
They certainly did. Interesting that you flipped that. Like, conversely, were there any points where you thought we wouldn't make it? I mean, for me, that was the Borough, Millwall, Swansea week. I think that was the order. Hodgey, any point that you thought, I'm not sure here, maybe we don't?
No, do you know, right, there was one point where I thought we wouldn't win the title, and that was when Brentford were looking really hot, and I commentated something like 3 or 4 Brentford games in the space of 6 weeks, and I just thought, my goodness, this looks like a football team, and they were right on it. But where perhaps naivety on my part are forgetting the way that the Championship is a wee bit. I mean, it's a season that is it's basically an endurance test, isn't it? Yeah. Given the volume of games. And especially with the calendar being condensed due to COVID, that was exacerbated even more this season. And I think the period that Norwich City won the league was that period where where Daniel Barden was jumping in goal, Jacob Sorensen was coming in at left back, where Josh Martin was obviously in the team because we just didn't have numbers. See that period where everyone really stepped up and just did what was needed of them, and we were grinding out results and we were doing that. That was the period we won the title. We might have gone up just based on the quality of the team and the football we played. But I don't think we would have been title winners had it not been for that period, that rigorous period that we really got through. But at the start of the season, and I mean, you were mentioning just before we sort of came on the pod, lads, like I obviously made a few predictions to yourselves last summer. I can't remember any of them. But
I'll remind you, it's fine.
I'm sure most of them were wrong. But to be fair, I did think we would bounce back up. To do it in the way that we have, particularly how resolute and strong we have looked. Not just defensively in terms of the defence, but the whole unit has been a surprise to me. And it's almost like we've now got the happy middle ground between at times playing that really cavalier, beautiful football, but we don't need to write a sort of Mozart-esque symphony like just to win games anymore. Yeah. We can win games 2-0 efficiently as well, turn the good football on, but also look solid at the back. And I think that combination of factors has a bit like Micheal and a bit like yourselves, I think, has made me pretty confident throughout the whole season.
Yeah, Jacob, you've been pretty confident, mate. Just quickly do your bit for us, mate.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. What was it? Probably until, was it Cardiff the first game that we hadn't won one in more than by 1 goal margin? For me, the moment was Blackburn away, when you've got Michael McGovern in goal, only just started off. Timu Pukki was kind of here and there, and then he kind of came onto the scene. You saw how sharp he was for the first one, particularly Alex Tete. What a turn that was. I'm sure we'll go on to him later. And then Buendia kind of just showed how good he was in that level. I was quite worried about Blackburn at that point. You know, you have Adam Armstrong who's gone on and scored loads of goals. Harvey Elliott, obviously, all the kind of recognition. And yeah, we actually turned them over, but with a 2-1 win. And I thought we looked so good. And then, like what Michael said, I was looking through the list of teams. I was thinking, who's actually going to go and beat Norwich's points total this season? Maybe Brentford, but they've got the bottle job tendencies, which they've gone and done again this season. Watford always looks strong. I think it helped when they changed their head coach. It kind of freed them up a lot more, didn't it? But apart from that, like Swansea, whilst they were very good defensively, I think when you're going up in a season, you can't rely on just your defence. Like, I know we have a lot this season, but they've got we have a lot of attacking kind of tendencies where, like Buendia, who you can rely on to get you that goal. For Swansea, didn't really have that. Andre Ayew aside. So for me, it was always, that kind of, like Hodgey said, December months, November months when 14 injuries, like that is just crazy how you win a title with those many injuries at one time. That's when we done it. And Daniel Farke deserves all the credit for that because he's been the one consistent.
Just on Swansea, actually, I know for a fact that Steve Cooper was really, really agitated about the fact that he wasn't backed and they didn't get a number 9 in January because Jamal Lowe is not a striker. He's a wide man, sort of masquerading as a striker. And Andre Ayew, because he's such a good player at championship level, he can look like a front man, but that's not his natural domain either. So I think the fact that Swansea are even in the playoffs, given the fact they don't really have a natural fit striker, deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, fair enough. We'll talk about players on an individual basis in a second. Just to add to what you've already said, I think it was quite a late point in the season, but when we were 1-0 up against Brentford at half time, then the second half,
the game management
looked so comfortable. We managed the game so well. And I just remember thinking, blimey, it's been a long, long time since I saw a Norwich side do that against such a good team, or, a pretty good team at this level. Anyway, let's talk about players, and we can talk about separate units within the team within that. But I thought there's only one place to start here with Barry Butler in his wardrobe or closet, whatever you put a trophy in. Emi Buendia, he's the best player in the league, isn't he?
By miles.
Yeah. It's not even close, is it? 15 goals, 17 assists. I think 120 odd chances created. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how good it's looked Micheal in person, how clear it's been that get the ball to Emi and he's been the difference.
I don't know if that sort of hammering we're hearing is perhaps Micheal batting his computer. Maybe that's the thing. I'm quite happy to just jump in the meantime. Most chances created in the division, as you say, 123 for Emi. Next best was 85. So that gives you some context of just how he was the best creative force in the league. He was involved in 42% of Norwich City's goals. He had the most key passes in the league, the most assists. And he was the only player in the top 5 leagues in Europe to have more than 15 goals and 15 assists in the season. So I don't think there's any doubt that he was by far the best player. And that I said last night on The Ball, Michael's podcast, that I think he's the only irreplaceable player in the Norwich City team. I think anyone else, we can sign a replacement. We can't replace Emi Buendia.
Completely agree. Michael, anything to add on Emi? Are you with us? No, let's go with no for now, and then we can come back.
Oh,
right,
maybe.
I want to talk about Grant Hanley, because he 100% deserved second place in that Barry Battle. If Emi Buendia wasn't at the club, he probably wins it. But I want to talk about him alongside his sort of defensive peers, because that defensive unit has improved so much this season, Hodgey.
It has, but I don't think. I mean, I'll be honest.
Can't really hear you.
It's cool.
I don't know. Hello.
We can just about hear you.
Kind of like a Dalek.
Let me come out and.
Okay.
Right. I'm good.
Right, as Michael does that, I'll just sort of pick up where we were going to speak. I don't think the defensive side, Grant Hanley's been a brilliant leader. Jeremy Goss in my podcast last night described him as our governor, right? Which is a kind of English term, but like I know exactly what he means. He's a stopper, he's a leader, he's got all of those different sort of aspects, and I think that's been really important. I think getting a proper central defensive pairing, and personally I think the best pairing we've had since Michael Turner and Seb Bassong playing together was really important with him and Ben Gibson. And I think that's a central defensive pairing that can do pretty decently in the Premier League. That's not to say that I don't want us to strengthen with another central defender, but I think our strength defensively this season has come from not just the back 2 or the back 4. It's come from the entire system. If you look at Ollie Skip, the protection he gives as a screener, Kenny McLean covering back. If one of the fullbacks goes forward, one of the deeper midfielders knows that they need to tuck in. That's where it's come from this season in terms of our strength defensively, and also the fact that we've got the person that should have been in the team of the season as the best goalkeeper, but I think they must have just capped the numbers at 5, if you include the manager for team of the season. 5 out of the 12 is a pretty good ratio, but Ollie Skip should have been in. Tim Krul's the best goalkeeper in the division as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Jacob, do you want to add to that, mate? Cover Aaron's and also Janulis. What is he going to do next season? What do we think?
I was just wondering quickly, Hodgey, what you thought about, because obviously Scotland's perception as well is quite interesting on Grant Hanley, because it's the lazy kind of, what I see is he's slow, he's not very good on the ball, but he is good in the air sort of thing. I think this season he's actually really changed perception for that, I think.
Among Norwich fans, definitely. Scotland fans, a lot of them still think he's a bit of a bomb scare. And the slow thing's nonsense. Like, he's really, really quick for a centre-back. He's one of the quickest at the club when it comes to the sprints. So, yeah, I think that's a load of nonsense. I think Grant's matured his game. I think Daniel Farke has helped to improve his ball carrying and sort of distribution abilities as well. He seems to be much more comfortable with that side of the game. He doesn't look like an awkward centre-back trying to play football. Not that he ever did, like, compared to some, but now he looks really refined in that side of the game. And I think the sort of consensus about him in Scotland is changing a wee bit. I think it's also helping the fact that Scotland don't really have any good central defenders. I think he's probably the best natural centre-back we've got. If any of my mates watch this, they'll probably slate me for that. But I genuinely believe that, because Scotland's other good centre-back is Kieran Tierney, you know? And then so Grant will play in the middle, and then it can be any one of a few. I mean, Jack Hendry's name's in there, who I don't think's any great shakes. So yeah, Hanley's been good. Janulis, I'd quite like to talk about just quickly as well. Janulis, I think, is going to be a player that we are going to see flourish in the Premier League. I think he's going to be one that 6 months to acclimatise, just get used to English football, the rubbish weather, the fact there's no motorway into Norwich. all of that kind of stuff. But Giannoulis, I think, is going to. I expect him to have a really strong campaign in the Premier League next season. And actually, assuming that Max Aarons does get snapped up, and I think he's the likeliest to go of our assets, I think Giannoulis could even emerge from next season as the best of Norwich City's fullbacks. I'm really, really confident about him and excited to see what he does, because I think he's got all facets of the game, defensively, attacking. I think he can do a bit of everything.
Michael, that it looks a bit better my end now. All good?
You're muted now, Michael. We just need the muter off and then we're ready to go. Yeah, we're there.
I'm in. Can you see me?
We're back.
Right, we were talking about the added defensive solidity.
We'll go back to Buendia first, Joe. I want to know what Michael's thought of like.
All right, cool.
In like the ground. Does it feel like, obviously there's no supporters, everything. Does it feel like with players, managers, like as soon as it gets to Emmy, it's just like he is a Premier League player in the Championship, or has he like developed that throughout the season?
I think the thing about Emmy is just the level of quality. I don't think I've ever seen him touch the ball. I can't think of any time he's miscontrolled a football, like ever. And I think there's just so much you almost take for granted about what he is, that you then just enjoy what he creates. And I think I get the sense from other teams that they try and stop him and wind him up, but the way he's dealt with things since he got sent off against Middlesbrough, I think, has been highly impressive. Yeah. I think, to be brutally honest, that probably comes from an elephant in the room, and an element of him knowing that he was being tested, and he harshly failed against Middlesbrough. And he's now proven that, he can deliver a title twice and that he can keep his head. And I think if you're trying to get yourself a move to a big club, you kind of need to deliver that when you're really under the cosh. So I think that level of maturity is really promising for him in his future career. It's probably bad news for Norwich because it means he's more likely to leave whenever it happens. And I've had so many people just constantly telling me, just enjoy him while he's here, which is the last thing you want to hear as a Norwich fan. So I think there's probably just been a level of acceptance from across the Championship that he's a player on a different level. I think he has a lot to prove still in the Premier League. I think what he's done, and apologies if I'm repeating what you guys have already said.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right.
I think the way he's developed his goal scoring threat is fascinating and really says a lot about him as a player, that he's got the potential just to do that and become such a potent attacking force. I think
right, Michael, because it was only one goal last year, and then he's exploded with 15. Like
it was, and this is a conscious thing. This isn't suddenly he's just hitting the target more, or the keeper can't cope with it. He is consciously getting into better positions. His composure, which he's kind of always had, but he's using it better in the right areas and situations. I think he's taking a shot when before he would have turned it down. His selection and decision making in those situations is much better because he's in it. It's like gearing up, I suppose, for a time trial. He's being able to practice that in a situation in a league where he's given that time, so he's being able to influence things greater. And again, that it'll be interesting how he deals with that, and B, how the Premier League teams deal with him, because they are much more astute at combating threats. And I think if we get to see that and how they tackle Emmy, that will be really interesting, because Norwich they still look a little bit reliant on certain positions to score goals, which I don't really like. I'm a little bit wary of that going forwards. But I mean, I have to say, Emmy is as good. It's good. And I don't really want to rank them, but he's as good as anyone I've seen in a Norwich shirt since I was there.
Would you say, Michael? Sorry, Hodgey, I was just going to cut. Hodgey said before you cut off, Michael, that he's the one indispensable, and I completely agree. I think he's the one player in that squad which you can't replace at all. Like I couldn't even picture it. I just couldn't picture it. Like a single player. I think
he's the one that would be hardest to replace. But by the same token, the fact that Norwich have got a player like Emi Buendia is kind of bizarre in itself, because he shouldn't be playing in the Championship, to be honest. So he is, in the same way if Lionel Messi was playing at Crystal Palace, they'd be pinching themselves. So I think there's that element to it. And I think anyone at Norwich would say, look, I think they even say we probably just won't, we aren't going to replace him in that way. We've just got to find a quality player that gives us an attacking edge in his absence. In some ways, much more important is finding someone to do the job Ollie Skip has done in the Premier League, because that role is pivotal to how the whole team works. I think you can replace an attacking element with something slightly different and work around it, but you have to get that holding midfield position right, because that is what went wrong 2 years ago. And I even had this discussion yesterday. It falls down because I don't think Alex Tettey would have stayed anyway. But I actually think that adds to the headache, because Alex Tettey, if he wanted to have stayed, having him as a backup would be better than literally having to replace Alex Tettey and Oliver Skip next season. So
Well, what it says to me though is, see the fact that they're letting Vrancic go, the fact that they're letting Tettey go, that says to me that they're freeing up spaces in the squad, because you've obviously got to think of the quotas in terms of numbers and stuff like that. They're freeing up spaces in the squad to invest in the squad. That's the way that's what I'm reading and extrapolating from the fact that we're letting these players go. So although it's sad to see Tettey and Vrancic leave, I think it's almost adding to my excitement to see what Kieran Scott and Stuart Webber come up with in terms of who we're going to bring in. But Michael's absolutely right. I think Ollie Skip has been not the best player this season, but he's probably been the most important player, because that was the axis of the team that was so weak last season. And on the On the Ball podcast, Michael, and you did a piece in The Athletic about it as well, about how the midfielders tucked in for the full backs, and I was kind of alluding to this earlier. That area of the team, and the fact that the defence has been so strong, has been about that sort of screening area at the sort of our half of the middle third. And that is the bit that we need to get right in terms of the summer recruitment. And just on the Emmy thing, I mean, it's marvellous that he's here, and I think it will be really interesting. The points you made about the goal threat, Michael, are absolutely bang on, and about the way that he's managed to cultivate that increased threat. And I'm just excited to see if that translates to the Premier League. I hope it does a bit. But if he scores 10 goals before January, bye-bye, Emmy.
For 50 million quid.
Yes.
Well, no.
Yeah.
And rising.
He's the one that could be Norwich's first £50 million player. And I know that certain people at the club have that as an ambition to sell a player for 50 million.
Okay, we've spoken about Emmy, Hanley, Skip, and the defence there. Let's talk about the players that didn't get in the top three for player of the season. The main one for me, I'm not saying that the people that did get it didn't deserve it. They absolutely did. But to the fact that Teemu Pukki scored 20 plus goals and not got a shout, I mean, he deserves it. You can't dispute that. But do we have a problem within the fan base that we just expect that from Teemu Pukki like it's normal? Like, is the output of 20 plus goals at this rate? Like, that's not normal, is it? He should be getting recognition for this, surely, lads.
Well, I mean, his strike rate is the best of any Norwich player of the last 50, 60 years, and not far off anyone in the club's history. I think, you know what, I think of Norwich winning 3-0 at Bristol City in 2011. And there was a ball over the top, or played through a channel, and Simeon Jackson ran onto it and smashed it into the top of the net. And you know what, I thought, I've waited so long to see Norwich with a striker who runs a channel in behind and finishes like that. Yeah. You'd see all these players who play for other teams, these quick strikers nipping in and finishing these chances and being so clever with their movement. And you'd be like, we've never had as much as I love Ewan and love all of the great, strikers that we did have. We seemed so short of that kind of a finisher for so long. And the decision to bring him in, I mean, is phenomenal, but it was kind of a matter of circumstance that it ended up how it was, because he was only going to back up Jordan Rhodes. He was going to play in the three positions behind him. And you think about how that has evolved into what he has done at this club. I think when someone produces so much, so often at such a high level, it is really hard not to, at least 5% of you, take them for granted. Yeah. And I have to say, I really hope that doesn't happen this summer, because regardless of everything Teemu's done, Norwich need another frontline striker next season. However they do it, they need to find it. So there's probably an element of that in the background. But I think with Teemu, it's just how wonderful a human being he is as well. I love him to bits. I think he's brilliant. And I think when maybe Ivan Toney will go on to be a better player in the long run. But, some of the things he chips in and says, you just wouldn't hear Teemu Pukki say, because he's sort of humble with the work he puts in and what he produces. So, I will never take Teemu Pukki for granted. I can say that much, and I would sincerely advise all Norwich fans not to either, because I think he's a gem.
Yeah, one of the things that makes me really sad is I just hope he manages to make the Euros for Finland. He's fired them there, and
it'll be the peak of his career.
It would absolutely. I said that last night. It'll be the culmination of his entire career. He's kind of worked for it, and I just hope he doesn't end up in a situation where he can't play at that, because he's at the peak of his powers right now, and it would be the absolute pinnacle for him. So fingers crossed and prayers up for Emi. For Teemu, not Emi.
I think that is so difficult and so unfortunate, because as devastating as it is for Kenny, he knows that his injury means he can't play. Teemu's in this horrible situation where they're not quite sure what to do. So what are you going to do? You're obviously going to give yourself the best possible chance to be involved. It might be all right, but it might not. And if it isn't, then Norwich are the ones who are going to basically have to deal with the consequences of that, and that's through no one's fault. It's just absolute bugger of a circumstance, and I really feel for him, because he'd spoken for months about how much he was looking forward to that. I mean, it's basically been 18 months, hasn't it? Because it should have happened last summer. So, and that would have been a wonderful opportunity for him to show, probably the only chance he'd get at that sort of tournament. So, I think everyone just keep their fingers crossed, most definitely, for everyone involved.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say just about Kenny, though, is Kenny wasn't the talisman and the guaranteed starter in the team. Kenny would probably have been coming off the bench. But obviously, Scotland's first tournament since 1998. So gutted for Kenny as well, who's another top guy, as I'm sure you agree, Michael.
Absolutely.
I think with Teemu as well, the difference, like you say, Michael, with the move and everything, is the difference when he's not there. I know Jordan Hugill is different, a different option, and not the same kind of player. And Adam Eder, I don't think, does he? But when even that Barnsley game where it doesn't matter, I know the result's completely different, but the amount of time that you're thinking Teemu Pukki makes that run there, Emi Buendia passes that ball when Hugill's up there, and it's just that movement which is such a difference. And like you say, to get someone of his level, which again he's going to be overplayed this summer. I know it's touch and go. He will. No matter what, if it's even a 50% chance, he's going to push his body through anything, isn't he? Because it's his peak. So we absolutely must get another player. But his movement, for me, in my kind of recollection of players, isn't as developed as others. But I can't remember a forward better in terms of movement, and then to be fair, finishing than him at Norwich.
Yeah, he's the best I've ever seen. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm really pretty sure of that. Okay, before we move on to the future, anyone else that you think really deserves a mention in terms of individual accolades this season? Hodgey, I know you're a big fan of Jacob Sorensen, £20 million player, as you called him last time you were on.
Potentially. I thought he was going to get more game time in the midfield, and actually, it was the success of the partnership of Skip and McLean that prevented that happening. I think there's another, just to kind of hark back to what we were just talking about there, another interesting discussion to be had, that if this COVID season will really have affected loads of teams. I've not got any stats in terms of the amount of players that have played so many club games and are now going to miss out in the Euros through injury, because I think that's an interesting sort of side note to that. Sorensen, for me, I get asked about my on Micheal's podcast about my unsung hero for the season, and I picked him, because it was during that period where he was asked to play at left back. This is a guy in a new country. He'd never played a position. He was asked to step in, and he was really, really good in terms of knowing when to be tight, knowing when to step off the defensive side of it. He was strong. Going forward, he wasn't brilliant, but he was decent enough and covered enough ground that he made the opposition defences think and of another threat to consider. And I just think for someone to so malleably adapt, and to so willingly commit to playing out of position at a vital period in the season, as it proved to be, was fantastic. And sometimes clubs have second season syndrome, but sometimes the opposite is true. Players, after they've had a year to acclimatise, they can really step in. And especially with the Ollie Skip hole needing to be filled, then I think we might see a bit more of Jacob Sorensen in midfield next season. I kind of hope we do, in a way, as long as he's good enough.
It, yeah.
Yeah,
deserves it, yeah.
And it will be interesting to see how his kind of game translates. It obviously, being at the ground, Michael, you're going to have a different perspective. In the short bursts that he's had playing in the middle of the park, and they were sporadic. What have you seen there? What kind of midfield player have you seen in Jacob?
Yeah, he's really interesting. So first thing, I think he's a wonderful footballer, and I definitely wouldn't laugh at calling him a £20 million player, because I think he's got a very high ceiling, that one. I think, and it's really interesting, because when I watched him in pre-season, I was like, oh, he's so neat and tidy. Is he really going to get all this time in the Championship? So then he's played there in the Championship, and he still looks like he's playing at sort of half a second pace slower than he needs to. Yet he does genuinely not. He still managed to deal with that. So at the moment, I'm thinking I see a really compact, clever footballer who's got great use of the ball, who's strong and can step in and move things around really nicely and can see what the pitch is, but hasn't got the same probably mobility as Ollie Skip and that defensive now. So I don't really see him as a direct replacement of Ollie, because I just don't think he can cover the ground quick enough. And there's a bit of me thinking in midfield, is he going to have the change of gear to be able to cope in the Premier League? But I've thought that at, about Championship level, and I think generally when he came in, he did show that. So I think he's probably just one of those players that's the pace he plays at, but actually he's good enough to deal with it. But he's got a lot of, like with the Premier League, you tend to start seeing how far people's journeys are when you get to the Premier League. You start to clock that, that this is quite a jump now, and it takes that little bit longer to adjust to it. So it might be that with Jacob, but or Jakob, as I always call him. But I think, like you've said, it's the second season of settling in. A lot will depend on who Norwich also bring in. But also, I think, and I've completely lost my train of thought there. What I was going to say, but I think he'll be much more bedded in. He'll know what he is expected to do, and I think he'll be in a better condition. He had to catch up quite a lot at the start of last year, and he got let down a little bit by going away on international duty with Denmark. Under 21s are not featuring. So I just remember Todd from a couple of years ago, just arriving in pre-season, and he would just look ready and like a different player. And I think that could happen to anyone over pre-season. So it'll be really interesting. But I hope he gets a go, because it'll be really interesting how Daniel Farke manages the squad in that regard.
He's definitely done enough for a go, surely.
I loved these numbers coming in, and I know he might not be the quickest, like in terms of actual engine power, sort of marathon rather than sprint. I mean, the numbers are impressive. You mentioned Cantwell, Michael. Todd, for me, is the player that has developed most in the season just gone there, because I think he has lifted his game to a level where he's now a consistent threat offensively, and that is it's a harder thing to do than to be consistently solid defensively if you're at the other end of the pitch. So I think that development in Todd's game has just increased his worth as an asset. And I'll be honest, when we came back down, I said last summer that it was probably the time to sell on Todd, because it had that sort of fits and bursts, but he'd done enough in the Premier League for a team to maybe take a punt on him. And I think had it not been for the pandemic, we could well have seen that happen. But I was wrong, because Todd Cantwell has lifted his game to a new level. He's got a new level of consistency. Also seems to be a really increased focus from him that I'm kind of perceiving. I mean, maybe that focus was always there, but maybe more in terms of sort of concentration during the games, intelligence of what spaces to take up both on and off the ball. I've just been so impressed, and I think if there was one other player that I would pick out for a mention, it would definitely be him. And he's one of our own, isn't he?
I think it's since that Cardiff game as well, that 2-0 one where he obviously did score himself. And I think it's so difficult with Todd, like you're saying, Hodgey. Obviously, local lad doesn't help. But then you're comparing him on the other side to this absolute freak of nature in Emi Buendia. And you're thinking, right, okay, do what Emi does. And he's not that player. But I tell you what, for me, what I picked up, like you said, Michael, last pre-season, I was like, is Todd going to, he'll probably go out on a loan or he won't feature. And like you say, I remember watching that Atalanta game. We got battered in the second half. But in that first half, he looked so good. And the spaces he picks up, he's actually a very intelligent footballer. I think we'll go on to it in a little bit. I think potentially on the wing, we do need a bit more pace and power, in to kind of capitalise on having less possession. But like you say, Hodgey, I think it's a really nice surprise, actually, that he's owned a lot of games this season, especially from 2021 onwards. I think it helps that he probably saw himself as, well, if I perform to my best, Norwich do go up. So, helps two birds, one stone. Does it happen if we're struggling? Don't know. But anyway, he's been brilliant in that second half of the season.
Good point.
And yeah, definitely deserves a full-on mention alongside Emi, really, for that main creative force for Timu this season.
Okay, great stuff, lads. Let's move forward. Let's look forward.
I just want to ask one more question, Joe, just before we finish off this season. I'm just interested to know, and I hope you two haven't been asked this. I was thinking, right, for me, in my mind, we've got 4 key people at this club right now who are actually beyond the level that Norwich are. That's for me, Max Aarons, Emi Buendia, Stuart Webber and Daniel Farke. And I was just wondering who you two, and Joe as well, who you think will have the best career in terms of the highest peak and how long for?
That is a brilliant question.
It is a good question.
I've been brewing on that.
Oh my gosh.
I'm glad you stopped me. That's a good question.
Oh, go on. God, Joe wants to answer it. Look, he's desperate.
Ready to go, letting you have time.
I just love Stuart Webber. I think it's Stuart Webber. I honestly think that if teams aren't looking at us and thinking we need to do that, and I don't care how big these teams are either, I'm talking top 6 European teams as well. If they're not looking at us and thinking that's how you're meant to do it, then I think they're wrong. Personally, I think you could put him into any club, certainly in the Premier League, and they'd just be great. Like, he's just, the culture he's set up is ridiculous, and I know a lot of other people help with that. But I just think he's the key man. Like, if without him, none of the other stuff happens. He's proper good, like proper good.
I think there's a difference, right, between being at a club like Norwich. By the way, this is not a criticism of Stuart Webber before it comes across that way. I would probably tend to... You're asking who's going to have the best career, so I would say Stuart Webber or Max Aarons, and I think it's dependent on a few variables, right? But Stuart Webber is a guy that could be easily is of the calibre to operate at a Champions League club. I have no doubts at all about that. However, it's in some ways easier to go into a club like Norwich where there is something to build, right? Mm-hmm. So I've had conversations with Stuart in the past where he was like, well, if I got offered the Man City job, like the equivalent job at Man City, what do I do? I mean, it's already like this super club. They've got a whole campus of stuff. Like, how can I improve that? And I know for a fact that certain European clubs, some big names have definitely registered interest in what his kind of next move's going to be, and it's going to be fascinating to see where he ends up. And every Norwich City fan in the land is going to wish Stuart Webber all the best for the rest of his career, and I think that is testament to what that he's done. Everyone's kind of going, and it reminds me of when Henrik Larsson left Celtic. There was no bitterness. It was like, yeah, you're leaving on a free, but good luck to you. Thank you so much. And it's going to be the exact same sort of emotions when Stuart Webber goes. But it's a different challenge when you go in at sort of a club, say, so if you went in right now at maybe a Chelsea, right? And this is for argument's sake. Webber's next move, I'm pretty sure, will be a bit broad, right? But I'm just using an English example as for kind of context. So if you go into Chelsea, right, they've already got a super training ground, they've already got so many good players, right? How do you actually improve that? Like, because what you're basically looking at then is you're focusing on getting big money signings, right? That is the bulk of what you're going to be able to do. So actually, a club like Norwich, he's been able to flex so many more aspects of what he can do, because he's had to improve the culture from sort of training ground up, youth teams, progression from youth teams to first team, so much of it, recruitment for the first team, recruitment for the under-23s, every level, right? So if you're going to a club where all of that's already pretty good anyway, how do you improve that? It's a totally different challenge. So for me, what will determine that is, and my sort of argument between Webber and Max Aarons is basically the moves they make and whether they get them right. Because Max Aarons is a player that I think is, in the Championship, he can play within himself and still excel. That's my opinion on it. When he goes into the Premier League next season, if he does with us or with someone else, I think he's going to do really, really well. And I think Max is a player who will suit playing at a club who, a bit like us, dominate the ball, but do it at an elite level. Because I think his attributes lend themselves to Champions League style football. He's that kind of fullback or wingback. So, and obviously there's another aspect is more teams are playing three at the back now. That plays so well into Max Aarons' hands because he's got a bit of everything if he's that man who's out covering the flank, you know. So I think what it's going to come down to is who makes the better moves in their career. But of the four names that you mentioned, the two that are undoubtedly Champions League caliber are Aarons and Webber. Spiel over. Sermon is now over. Sorry.
That's good. Michael, what do you think?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I would disagree with you, Joe. I think if you stuck Stuart Webber in most of the Premier League clubs right now, I think he'd have an issue because of owners and people meddling. And I think the freedom he's been given here is exceptional for the level of club. I could see Stuart having maybe the most impactful career, but I don't know if that's in football. I just think that might be in general. I think he's an astute man with loads of things he wants to do, and yeah, I think he could end up anywhere, to be honest.
Well, what do you mean by that? That's really interesting.
Well, the world doesn't revolve just around football, does it? I mean, you could go and lead any organisation, or you don't have to just work in football, do you? If you're a leader in your culture and you're all sorts. Obviously, I'm making this up as I go along. I'm just giving you my opinion. But
that's a fascinating point, though. Like, he's obviously got passions in other sports and areas of life as well.
Like F1 or something.
Well, literally making it up, or he could end up. He might get a freedom that he won't get in England at a club abroad, for example, as well, if he does stay in football. So that's one thing I sort of riff over in my head. I think it's very difficult to pick between Emmy and Max for a lot of what Stuart's said, and I've written a piece, as he mentions, about how Max may well be suited for a team that can do what Norwich do at a higher level. And actually then Norwich might be better off with a more defensively minded fullback, possibly. Yeah. But he has literally cruised through the Championship. And I talk about taking players for granted. I feel like that's happened with Max this season almost completely. So I think the ceiling for him and Emmy is really, I think Emmy technically, and if he has the maturity and he carries on what he's doing now, he will be playing for Argentina, and then it's all sorts, isn't it? Whereas in fairness, Max has got a lot of competition to play for England. So I think I've sat on the fence there. And then Daniel, I mean, Daniel's task may well be next to try and do it without Stuart. That's probably something he might have to prove. Again, they both those guys, everyone here can be so thankful about what those two have done. But I think equally, those two will both know exactly the quality of the position and opportunity they've had here over 4 years. So the amount of times I've seen football managers be at Norwich and think, oh, they're going to have such good careers. And then that's that. They go somewhere and pan. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to Daniel. Of course I'm not. From what I've seen, there's so much about him that I love. But you just don't know. Football's a horrible sport in so many ways. And again, you have to really really appreciate where you are and what you're doing, because you just don't know. So that's a roundabout way of me probably saying I've got no idea.
Great points on Webber. I do agree. He does have the freedom of the city almost, doesn't he? In fairness, when you put it to me like that, I did think...
He's at the time as well, hasn't he? Like that first season, how many clubs majority, I'd say, you finished 14th with James Maddison, who's now a Champions League, potentially Europa League player. Yeah, Not many people give both coach and sporting director that amount of time.
So a couple of things just on that though. Like, I mean, you made an interesting point, Michael, about getting freedom. I think the sporting director model is gradually getting more accepted in this country, but it's been a bugbear of mine for years that's been the way it's operated in the continent at the highest levels, all the way down the pyramid in Germany and Spain and France and all these countries, right? Whereas we were so tied into the mentality of the Alex Ferguson as the manager, kind of, he does everything around the football club. And with Fergie, that was amazing. It's what makes him the best manager of all time. Brilliant, right? But Alex Ferguson was a manager, a sporting director, a coach. He was a one-man polymath of everything, right? So he was able to do that. But the nature of the way that football has evolved and the way that the game is now is the best functioning model, unless you get that odd outlier like Fergie, is you want a sporting director and you want a manager and you want two of them that get on. What's happened at Bayern Munich recently, for example, is that there's been a complete disconnect between what the sporting director's doing and what the manager's doing, which is why Hansi Flick's out the door there, because he wanted to bring in, and it's ironic actually, because the coach wanted to blood more young players and the sporting director was buying in players because he wanted like the big names, right? So it's kind of flies in the face of what you would think it would be, because you would think it would be like the first team coach that was hungry for the big names and the big players, you know. So yeah, I think in this country there is more of an understanding, and I think, by the way, Stuart Webber has been the poster boy for demonstrating how this model can work in this country. And the reason that you're going to see that acceleration now of more and more clubs doing it, there's courses run by various universities and training bodies around bringing sporting directors and people doing that role through. And the reason, a real catalyst for all of that happening, has been Webber's success. So I think that plays into exactly what Michael said about him having an effect that goes well beyond Norwich City. You know, like it goes well beyond our football club. And Daniel's going to be brilliant. And another exciting thing is Daniel's been a sporting director in the past as well. Daniel Farke, could he be sporting director of Norwich one day?
Or do both for a bit or something? Maybe. Yeah, you never know.
Maybe.
Aye. Double, blimey.
Shall we look forward? I feel like it's time to. Great question, Jay. Right, before we go any further, let's just establish, does this team stay up without additions? I don't think we do as bad, but I don't think we'd stay up.
No.
Anyone?
No. With zero, yeah? No, absolutely not.
No, cool. Right, we all think that then. Right, so if that's the case, where do we need to buy? What positions? Let's hear your shopping list. Jay, you've been pretty quiet so far, mate. You go first on this one. Go on.
Well, it depends what you want. So if you're keeping Nyland, then fine. If not, then you need a backup goalkeeper. For me, I wouldn't keep Nyland because I think Ralph Fairman did Tim Krul the world of good. What was it, last season, if we're still quoting that as last season. So yeah, I would say proper competition, but then it's such a tricky position to fill because how do you get someone with good quality in who's going to be backup? So this is why I'm not a sporting director, so I'm glad. But yeah, so backup keeper. If Aarons goes, which in my mind he's probably the one who does, then obviously fullback, because Sam Byram, I mean, I don't know, Michael might know more than me, but is he even running? Who knows? Like, it's impossible to know what happens with him. If he can somehow get back to playing football again, is good. If he can get to Premier League, that's for me a bit of a miracle. Backup fullback, left back as well, because Sam McCallum, I don't know, it's just my opinion, I don't think he's trusted. I don't think you loan him out if we've only Xavi Quinter, because as we've seen, no one plays 46 games in the Championship. It's just impossible. So maybe he needs another development. Another centre-back, whilst Gibbs and Hanley are brilliant, Omobamidele probably stays until January, doesn't he? If he doesn't get any football, then he goes out on loan. Zimbo, injury-prone. All 3 out of those 4 are injury-prone, and the other one's 18 years old. So a proper good quality centre-back for me. Replacement for Ollie Skip, which easier said than done. Hopefully it is Ollie Skip, but I think he's done too well to come back, and Spurs are too much in the mire not to keep him. Pacey winger, upgrade on Plaheta and Onel. I love Onel. Plaheta we just haven't seen, but neither for me are Premier League quality, and proper raw pace is something we've missed, because like you alluded to earlier, Michael, in terms of Premier League level, I think we only really have Emi Buendia who creates chances still. Todd Cantwell converts chances. Does he create at the level that Emi would in the Prem? Not for me. I think you still only have one. If you stop Emi Buendia in the Prem, I think you struggle to score, which we saw obviously last season with 26 goals, and then another quality forward. Team who's going to be, no matter what happens with Finland, absolutely exhausted again. And you cannot rely on him again for 30 plus games. What is he now? 31. He's still a fantastic forward and brilliant, but you need someone who can definitely and play at that level that he can. Whilst Hugel's not a replacement for Pukki, he's a different option. So I think you need someone in a Pukki mould, maybe running behind, Adam Armstrong-esque. Not saying he's the player you go for because he misses a lot of chances, but a bit of pace in behind with that kind of movement. I think that's my shopping list done.
Anything to add to that, Michael or Hodgey?
Well, I think Jacob's done a phenomenal job there. Yeah. Well done. I think that's pretty much it, really. I think we had a really interesting debate last night on the ball about whether I think you and Steve Sanders, obviously at NCFC Numbers, what a guy.
Brilliant account.
Yeah. You both shocked me really by saying that you weren't convinced by Kieran Dowell and that Norwich needed a number 10. Because
yes, I agree with that as well.
Me too.
Really? What is this about?
Dowell.
I'm going to have the same debate now, aren't I? This pod is
I love it, Michael. Everybody disagrees with it.
If you want to say I want an upgrade, then that's fair enough. But you're literally going to have that is your 11th priority out of the 10. The 11th out of the 11 in terms of priorities, probably, or maybe 10th behind goalkeeper because only a backup, isn't it? But I mean, literally, Kieran Dowell. I get it completely. He drifts in a lot of games, and you don't see him. But I tell you what, the impact he's made with goals and assists is there. And I think if he does that at a contributory level, I think that will be impressive. I remember speaking to him at the end of the Reading game, and it struck me how excited he was about the Premier League and like driven. There was something in him where he said, I can't wait to have a proper crack at it. And, the guy's been at Everton. He's not going to arrive in the Premier League like Marco Stiepermann and go, I don't know if I can do this. And then he couldn't, which I still think was mostly between the ears of Marco. Kieran will be, he'll be like, I've done it. I've made my debut in the Premier League against Norwich years ago. He will. So I just think if you look at a player development settling potential, sorry, that wasn't a sentence. That was just a string of words. I think Kieran has that, and I think he's had a bit of time to develop into the role as well. I think he knows what he needs, and he will need to improve. He needs to keep developing. And don't get me wrong, I can see why maybe the workload that someone like Lucas Ripple or whoever has got through haven't quite he's not quite at that level. But I don't see it as, I think there's so many more positions that are much more important, and one thing Norwich are going to have to do is prioritize and then get it right. So I think priority wise is someone to cover both fullbacks, which Brandon Williams can do. So him on loan, I found a really interesting link. Centre back is obviously out there. I think Norwich have already been linked with 54 of them. A striker, as I've mentioned, and replacing Ollie Skip. I think they're four absolutely essential quality. Well, no, maybe not the fullbacks, but certainly three of those are essential pieces of quality recruitment necessary.
Okay, case for the prosecution, right? If you look at that first 11, right, then Tim Krul, you would say you'd be happy to run with him.
Fine, yeah.
Max Aarons hasn't left yet. You'd be happy to run with him. Ben Gibson and Hanley, you'd be happy to run with them. Giannoulis, you'd be happy to run with them. Ollie Skip, it looks like he's going to be needing replaced, but let's imagine a world where Spurs say have him again. You're going to be happy to run with him. He's got a good partnership with Kenny McLean. You probably want to bring someone else into that area, but you'd be pretty happy to run with him. Yeah. Todd and Emi, you'd be happy to run with them in the wings, although you want probably someone who's a bit more athletic for competition. And yes, you want competition for Pukki up front, and you want maybe a different kind of option. Again, maybe someone more athletic and more powerful, whatever. But you look at the number 10 slot, and it's the one position in the first 11 where you go, really? Are we sure? And that is why I think you need someone else in that position. And now, don't get me wrong, Michael, right? When you're one of the benefits of being a sort of feet in the ground journal is you get to have these conversations, and it gives you a bit of insight into what these players are thinking and the hunger that they've got, the desire they've got, that kind of thing. And you've clearly seen a steely look in Kieran Dowell's eye, which makes you think this lad's going to have a big season next season. And my goodness, I hope both for his sake and for Norwich's sake that you're right. But when I look at that first 11, the first position that I'm going, do we maybe need someone a bit better in there as that central attacking midfield role? And that is why I would say that has got to be a priority. So just to run through mine quickly, keeper's fine, probably want another backup. Going to need to replace Max Aarons realistically. Aarons, right. Actually, now when I write it in a script, I write it in phonetics. I write ear as in the ear. Max Aarons you're going to have to replace. Centre backs, we need one really quality one, and preferably one and a half really quality ones or two. We need cover at the other full back position as well. Ollie Skip's going to need replacing. What we're getting at is it's going to be a heavy summer. Probably want another good engine in the midfield area, although Sorensen could maybe do that. We want a natural winger, I think, a natural wide player, because both Cantwell and Buendia are more like kind of playmaking types who like to drift. They're not sort of natural beat-a-man wingers, and Onel Hernandez, with the greatest of respect, is not a Premier League quality player. He might impact the odd game, but he's a bit part player at best, and he's coming off a pretty poor season, albeit disrupted by various things. And we really, really need a striker of a different ilk to Teemu Pukki. And a lot of people like to think of the sort of, someone we can lump it up to for the last 10 minutes, but I believe that was the methodology that signed Joseph Durmich. So I'm not necessarily going for that. I would rather have someone who is more of a kind of complete striker who can provide actual competition and keep Teemu Pukki out the team at times if Teemu's in a poor run of form or injured or whatever. Because we definitely don't want to be putting that on the shoulders of Adam Ida, who I kind of hope goes out on loan and has a really good season at a Championship club. And Jordan Hugo is, he's a third man at best at Premier League level. With all due respect to him, he's a legendary dancer. So that's my quick shopping list. But I really like. Me and Michael see football the same so often, so I love how differently we see this.
I was going to relight the fire as well. I was just going to relight the fire quickly for Dow. I don't know if he presses well enough for me. And one thing we lacked in the Premier League in midfield was physicality and the legs, and I don't think Kieran Dow offers that. But go on, Michael, go carry on.
No, I get that, and what disappointed me slightly was that he did that in pre-season, obviously where the level is really hard to judge, and then I didn't really see that replicate in the Championship, but he did get injured and then he came back in, so it's kind of hard to judge. But all I'll say is, again, Hodgey's listed that, you look at the 11 as it is, and that's number 10's weak spot, but then also listed 3 or 4 places that also need replacing, so or need strengthening. So I think that's just the element, because ultimately probably Norwich probably do need a number 10, just because are they going to rely on Marco Steedman, and is Lucas Rupp an issue as well? So there is that element of it. But how many players are Norwich going to bring in this summer? I think there will be quite a few, but there's going to be a few decisions on that probably to be made as well.
What's more important for survival in both of your opinions? Scoring the goals or keeping them out?
I'm sort of in the middle of writing a piece on all this, actually, so that might come out soon. But I think look out for that this week on the Athletic. I think that's a wonderful question. I feel like, and having looked at it, Norwich have underperformed their XG. So to me, that means there's more potential if they can get the right striker recruitments in. It's probably easier for them to sustain their defensive record, which they've kind of outperformed their expected goals against. But I look at Giannoulis, Ben Gibson, and Grant Hanley, and I look at how solid they look at Championship level, and there's just a bit in the back of my head that's like, yeah, but what about the Premier League? And there will be a lot of people seeing Grant Hanley return to the Premier League next season and going, and that will be their reaction. Yeah. And the thing about the Championship is if you're in this sort of weird middle ground, the Championship makes you look so good, and it takes 3 weeks for the Premier League to make you look bang average, if not worse. And so maybe that's just my own hangover that I haven't quite got over. But, that's something that will require a significant level of objectivity from those inside Carrow Road. Otherwise, they will get caught out. It's a really difficult one. I don't have an answer.
I think you make a couple of really good points there. I'm not sure if the period where you turned into a Dalek earlier on was when I told you about like how all my mates will be basically slate me anytime I champion Grant Hanley's virtues and attributes. But I think the one thing I would say about Hanley and Gibson, right, is they're going into that Premier League with a point to prove.
Yeah.
Hanley because of this perception of him, Gibson because he didn't get a chance the last time. So with them as a pairing, setting aside obviously the injury concerns with Gibson, which have been sort of a prevalent thing during his career, I think they both have something to prove. I don't think we should rely on them as our choice pairing. I think we definitely need to get competition in that area of the pitch very, very badly. And I would love us to sign a brilliant defender. But defending's about partnerships as well, because Ben Godfrey is a better footballer than either of those two. Did Norwich City look better after Ben Godfrey was so defensively? Yes, we absolutely did. So it's about the balance between the pairing that makes that really important. And what we were alluding to earlier about everything that happens in the two positions in front of the back four. And on Michael's podcast last night, Big Grant Holt, John Rogers, sort of came up with a really interesting thing that he thinks we might see three at the back a bit more next season. Sorry if I'm giving away all the good stuff here on the ball, Michael. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing to consider as well. And he wanted to be three quality players. So for me, I think if we buy another good striker, then I'm kind of confident the attacking side will take care of itself, if that makes sense. And I think where we're going to really have to make sure and improve is defensively, because frankly, we were embarrassing defensively last time in the Premier League. And we would have been pretty blunt up front as well if it wasn't for Pookie's hot start. So, but both sides need strengthening. But the defend is the bit that the make or break for me. As long as we're getting enough goals at the other end.
We all seem fairly confident and in agreement that it will be a busy summer. Are you expecting Stuart Webber to start splashing a bit more cash around, or do you think it will be fairly conservative still?
Record transfer fee, yes or no? Will it be broken?
That's another question. That's another question that keeps going up.
More than once. Ooh, like it.
I mean, they're pretty close to having already done it with Ben Gibson.
True.
So I expect that is the bracket that they will be recruiting in now, and probably a chunk of it will depend on if they sell someone. I have to be honest. I think if the spending power changes greatly if they make a big sale, and last summer they bought ahead of selling because they were anticipating the sales. They're not going to do that probably this time. I wouldn't have thought. So yeah, I expect they do, but I know what it's like. Norwich make 2 or 3 really exciting signings, and that's because they've just got the good news out before they sell someone. It can sometimes be a bit like that in a summer. So we'll have to see. But I think, as has been said before, if you sell someone for a record fee and you're doing it because you can bring in 3 or 4 players of better quality across the team, you can end up with a better team. And I would rather see that than see a Norwich side reliant on 1 or 2 people in the Premier League next year, because it does no one any favours.
Completely agree.
The market's completely changed because of COVID as well. Like, I mean, that has totally changed the way that teams are doing their business. Brexit, from obviously a kind of work permits and all of that sort of point of view, from recruiting in. But I'm thinking more in terms of who we're actually going to sell, because I reckon Todd Cantwell, maybe Emi Buendia and Max Aarons would already have left the club by now. And Ben Godfrey, we might have got a few more million quid for, but had it not been for the effect of all this pandemic. It's really forced even the biggest teams to tighten their belts. And that makes it really challenging as well, because on one side you've got that, and sorry, I'll let you come in a wee second, Michael. On one side you've got that, and then from our recruitment perspective, teams are going to be going, Norwich City are going up to the Premier League. They'll be preparing to spend money, and they'll be looking at us thinking that we're going to splash the cash, albeit that Stuart Webber's shown he's not going to be bullied in transfers in the past. So it's quite a hard balance that they're trying to strike in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, that first summer ahead of the Premier League was really difficult because Norwich couldn't operate the way they wanted to, and then didn't, and that was a major challenge. So that is something I'll be keenly looking at because they've got to have learned from that. And in fair play to Stuart Webber, it was his first experience of it himself as well. He didn't get to do that at Huddersfield. He only managed to sort of get them there. So that's certainly one big element. And there is still a bit of me that looks at it and thinks, where does Emi Buendia go? Who is the club that comes in and offers 35 million quid for him? Max Aarons, who comes in and offers 30? There's a bit of me that thinks has anyone got the money to do that? I'm not sure.
Michael.
With the club's link with Max though, like that feels like he's got to go. It feels like you're rejecting Roma, which Stuart Webber, Roma was the club, wasn't it, in January? Europa League semi-final. For me, if you're rejecting that level, you're expecting, or you've been told that a bigger club than that is coming in for you.
Exactly. Well, and Bayern Munich obviously as well have been linked and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying they're not going anywhere. I'm going to be fascinated by how it plays out because as we say, Norwich are operating in a market where they're hoping to take advantage of other clubs' strife, whilst also hoping to get some big fees in. So it'll be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean the good thing is we know they'll be across most of the players in Europe and hopefully manage to get a few rough gems. They've done it in the past, but I think the difference this time is it's higher stakes poker. Because what you're doing is there's going to be significant outlays. There has to be, because the Premier League is just such of a jump up from even the top end of the Championship now that you're going to have to make significant outlays, especially with Norwich being, for example, Watford have pound for pound a pretty better squad than us, right? Especially in terms of depth. But that's because of their ownership model, the Udinese Granada connection and various other things allows them to do that. And they'll also be able to just shunt players from one to the other, which is something I completely don't agree with, by the way, but that's by the by. Whereas Norwich, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make that outlay. And this, I mean, the one thing that you think is if we buy one big money signing and it flops, I mean, for Norwich, that's a majorly big deal. I'm confident with these guys that do our recruitment that we won't, I think we will get it right, but I think it's going to be higher stakes stuff this year, and it's such an exciting summer. I agree with you on Emi, Michael. I think the Premier League season he had last year means that we'll have him to at least January. But
the discipline as well. Although
it has improved recently, but teams will still just be looking at the number of red cards and stuff like that. And then they'll be thinking, no, we'll steer clear. But if he gets to January without a red card and with something approaching 10 goals and assists, then he's gone. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. That's inevitable. Max Aarons going this summer is not necessarily an inevitability, but I think it's a likelihood. And I also think it's the asset that makes the most sense to sell for Norwich. This sounds really bad, but actually I want us to sell Max Aarons because we can buy a more defensive-minded fullback that will be maybe a bit taller and a bit better for us in the Premier League for one, and we'll be able to buy 2 or 3 other players besides that for the fee that we're going to get. And also for Max himself, another season in the Premier League would do him no harm, but I think he needs to go to a club where he's expected to win most weeks rather than a team where a win in the Premier League's a bonus, So I think for him and for the club, it's not like Todd where I thought it was just the right time for the club to sell and was wrong. I think this summer would make the most sense for all parties involved. But again, I think it's got to be a record fee. I think we've got to break the record for the fee we get in again, and there will be add-ons on top or whatever the initial figure is. So beginning with a 3 and with add-ons taking it to a 4 probably.
Yeah, he'll definitely go for a record fee. I was just going to ask you, where do you think he'll go?
I think it'll be a move abroad, actually. I think going to the continent will really suit him because of A, his stature, and B, his style. I think will just be more suited than the kind of power-charged Premier League high-octane turbo stuff, which kind of feels less like that in the COVID world, the Prem. But yeah, Germany or Spain, I think would really suit him as a move. and especially the Bundesliga. And I just think we our sort of connections there now with coaching staff and stuff like that. People in football have conversations, right? And the coaching staff at Norwich and all of the different sort of representatives and people we've got connected to Germany will have been talking about this kid, and people in Germany will be well aware of him. And it's not just the Sky Germany linking him to Bayern Munich stuff. I mean, it goes deeper than that. So I think most likely destination's probably Germany. Although if some other Premier League team comes in with a crazy fee, happy days, man.
Okay. Final question on recruitment, I promise. Does the contract situation surrounding Weber and Farke, with them both being up next summer, I believe, does that mean they go for it a bit more in both windows this year? Can you see that having any sort of impact on how much we stick our neck on the line this season? Anyone?
Michael, you
do you want me to go?
You go.
No, I don't. Not for that reason. I think there's enough other reasons for them to do it without it coming down to that.
True.
I literally, again, there's a piece on this on the Athletic, but I think how I see it is that they just don't want it to be an issue, and they want to get on with everything and carry on. And I think that's commendable. I just worry that the more months tick by, the more it will be an issue. And I it's really hard without being in the conversations with players and the people they're trying to sign on. But if I was a player wanting to sign on for 2 or 3 years at Norwich, and the manager and the sporting director only had 8 months to run on their deals, I would be a bit like, well, what happens if we get relegated and you've all gone? What do I do? So I don't know if that's being brought up, but that just seems like something that would come up. And I don't think the people at Norwich want it to come up, and they really won't want it to be a distraction. Also, both Stuart and Daniel have earned a lot of trust in what they've done and how they've done it. And I think they do hold a huge amount of respect. So if anyone could get away with this, if that's maybe the wrong way of phrasing it, I think it is them, because I think that of everything they've done and the humans they are, how they go about things, the integrity they do their jobs. So football doesn't really tend to deal with that very well. So it's, again, much like most things, completely fascinating how it pans out from here. I don't see anything resolving it particularly quickly, because I just don't think it's going to come up. And ultimately, it'll probably come down to the Norwich board to deal with Stuart, because then that filters down to what happens with Daniel. But if anyone said they knew what was going to happen, they'd be lying. I think ultimately Norwich have got to get through the summer transfer window and get into next season. And then maybe once the recruitment side of it can die down a little bit, which tends to happen come September, maybe there'll be some conversations. But I don't know. That's as I see it at the moment.
I think that's a great answer. And you brought up a point that I hadn't actually began to think of, which is that is a question that players' agents are going to be asking, that we're trying to get through the door. You've got 1 year in your contract. Well, anyone who's been prudent and sensible about it, doing their due diligence, will say, right, so what happens next summer then? What's the succession plan here? So that's a really, really, really good point, Michael. So I think that is something to consider. I think Stuart Webber, by the way, I've heard people have asked me before, will there be an extension? He's going to go. He's going to leave his body of work and things like that. I think it would be to Norwich City's benefit that if Daniel Farke is interested in discussing a contract extension, even if it's just 1 more year, that it would make sense to do that early in the new season, because what it does is it gives that sense of continuity, that sense of, the boss is here. It's a bit of trust. And also, I mean, I don't understand the mindset of a professional footballer. I wouldn't claim to. And I mean, a professional footballer, everybody's different, right? Even players within the game, obviously. So would it make a difference to them if they're thinking, my manager's out of contract, so I mean, I'm going to have to prove myself next summer all over again anyway, potentially? Like, I mean, does that impact their motivation in some way to train? I'm not saying necessarily to win games, but could be a factor. But I think for Norwich City, the best thing would be to, if he's open to it, to discuss it with Daniel Farke quite quickly. And with Weber, I don't think it's going to impact the way he does his business at all, because he's always been about the holistic picture. He's always been about the long term of the football club. He's not going to jeopardise the club long term just to make himself look good in the short term, because that is not the actions of a good sporting director, and it's not the way he operates. So I don't think it will make any difference to him or the way he does his business. I think with Daniel Farke, that's the more interesting question for me, because what is the succession plan with Daniel? Is there going to be another year, or are we going to lose them both? You know,
Hodgey. I
think
I'm with you.
Well, it could all.
He's already gone. Don't worry.
Football moves on. Football moves on, and I'm pretty sure that the succession plan will already be in place with Norwich City with Weber, and I expect it, like, by 98 to 99% of my being, to be an internal appointment. Like, I don't see them going out with
Kieran Scott,
who's already there. So I think that is something that we can take a bit of comfort from. And I think head coach, the thing is, if you've got a sporting director that knows what they're doing, especially someone that's learnt the ropes under Stuart Weber, then, I mean, a head coach, even a legend like Daniel Farke, is expendable, like, and replaceable. You know, like,
that's the whole point of the model as well, isn't it, Hodgey? The sporting director's the one, and the head coach can kind of be changed if needed, and that model always stays the same.
Exactly. And then the key bit is about the balance of getting someone who is a head coach who understands that, which in the UK is more challenging than abroad. Like, that's one of the main things that's a difficulty. And it makes me wonder if that's why Stuart Weber went for a foreign appointment, because Daniel Farke has been a sporting director before, so he understands Stuart Weber's job, and that makes Stuart Weber's job, he's told me himself, it makes it a lot easier for him when he's having conversations with Daniel, because there is that mutual understanding and acceptance there. And that's going to be the challenge for Norwich City moving forward. But it's not going to impact the way we do business this summer, I don't think.
Okay, great stuff. All right, we've been going a while now, lads, so let's wrap it up. One final question. I was going to ask you whether you think we'll stay up or not, but it's too early to call that. I don't feel comfortable doing that. So, in a word, who will be coming up via the playoffs?
Cool. Bournemouth. Yeah, I feel Bournemouth have the quality. I know they're in a pretty wretched run at the moment, but I feel like if you stick a side in front of Bournemouth, they'll beat them. If their heads are really on it. I thought it was interesting. Dean Ashton on Quest said he felt Swansea would do it. I hadn't really sort of considered that, but having seen them sort of deal with the experience maybe last season, while I could see that impacting Brentford negatively, I could see that being a positive impact for Swansea. And if I'm right, is it not? Is it Swansea Bournemouth in the semi-finals?
Swansea Barnsley.
Swansea Barnsley. Well, there you go then. Swansea Bournemouth in the final, and Bournemouth to win it.
Right, the winner of Swansea Barnsley wins the playoffs.
Blimey, you're going with momentum. Well, Barnsley have got momentum, I suppose. Barnsley have got momentum.
I think Cooper is a brilliant tactician, and I think he can nullify teams out of games. But I think my two favourite bosses in the playoffs, and maybe I'm letting that weigh my decision, I don't know, are Ismail and Cooper. Yeah. I think are the two most talented coaches that are involved in that. Although Woodgate's had a brilliant impact at Bournemouth, to be fair to him, and I'm sure if you ask any Brentford fan, they'll laud Thomas Frank. So I want Barnsley to do it. But I think if Swansea have enough to keep them out over two legs, I would fancy their chances of squeaking through in the final. But I'm right behind the Tykes, man. I'm on the Barnsley.
They're horrible to play against as well, aren't they? I guess you saw that firsthand, Michael, like that press and then 60 minutes, right, front three off, next three on. So the press continued. It actually looked quite uncomfortable for Norwich to play against.
No, I think Valerian's done a wonderful job there. Their recruitment has been absolutely spot on as well. And you think about the fact they almost got relegated last season. they've done a phenomenal job. I've felt like quality-wise, it's been pretty clear who the best teams in the division have been. But Barnsley, in terms of what they've done with that, what they've done with it is probably not quite as much quality in it, but like I say, just the energy, and not many teams have sort of just suffocated Norwich actually on their own defensive line, and they've done that. Norwich really struggled to get out the press. They did leave themselves a bit open at the back a lot, and I think that is a vulnerability that they've got. I do like Micheal a lot, I do wonder if some people might look at Barnsley if they don't go up and think there's a few here. So yeah, maybe that's a reason. You could think that you want them to go up because Norwich should beat them, or not go up, and then we can pick a few of their players just to be completely arrogant about it. But by the same token, Barnsley are so horrible to play against that. I wouldn't really want to play them either. So.
No, do you know what I said this in your pod, Michael? I'm so glad we're not in the playoffs because it's as strong in contrast now four as I can remember. Really, really good. Barnsley that's actually a good reason for me not to want them to go up, because they might have players that we can potentially have a look at. And I love Daryl DK up front. I think he's exactly the type of striker Norwich need. He's not owned by Barnsley. Orlando City is on loan from, and they've got a clause in the deal that they can buy a certain percentage of him or whatever, for I think it's $20 million. I imagine Orlando are regretting that clause, whether Barnsley pay it or not. Barnsley, if they go up, will pay that. I'm wholeheartedly sure of that. But what Norwich would get quoted for him, I don't know if he would be in our bracket. And that we're talking about a player in the MLS, so that just underlines how difficult a kind of position we're in terms of just getting the balance right with the recruitment, the balance between value and quality. But Barnsley have some lovely players. Callum Britton's stepped up really well for them in the wide area, and Alex Mowatt's, if I was a Barnsley fan,
out of contract as well.
Him and Micheal.
Him being out of contract on a free stinks of Norwich.
I don't know. I don't know if he would suit our style, but I hope Barnsley keep him, actually, just because Yorkshire lad. He's played Yorkshire all his days. Aye. I know, by the way, eligible for Scotland. So
is he?
Aye, know that I want him. We've got enough good midfielders. Maybe he's the Kenny McLean replacement. Although I'd like them to fling Billy. I want them to fling Billy Gilmer in the squad.
Yeah, why not? Jacob, have you got anything to add before I wrap up, mate? You've been sat there patiently, or not at all? Maybe he's gone.
He's stuck.
He's stuck. He's so patient. He's not moving.
He's been like that for 25 minutes.
It's a Madame Tussauds waxwork. That's not the real Jacobs.
Brilliant. Look at that. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Gents, thank you so much for joining us as usual. You're always very welcome, and we do love having you on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But what a season it's been. Been nice to share some thoughts with you and stuff like that. But yeah. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Then go over to Michael's channel, like, comment, and subscribe, and then Hodgey's new podcast.
The podcast is called Hodge on Nodge, and then you find all my stuff, Hodgey the Hack, HODGEY the Hack. You can find everything that I do, and that's on all the social medias now. I am a brand, baby.
Hodgey the brand. There we go. Go and follow all of them. Michael's stuff too, and if you can chuck us a follow as well, that'd be great. But thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you at some point soon.
See you, man.
Wave, Jacob. You've got just about enough time to wave bye, mate.
Yeah, my computer, linked up and everything. Me and Bailey have had problems. Fine. Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.